I want to talk to you today about the power of small improvements. So often we think we have to make big, dramatic changes in our lives to see real progress. We say, I need to lose 50 pounds, or I need to read the whole Bible, or I need to get out of debt overnight. And when it doesn't happen right away, we get discouraged and give up. But the key to success, the key to becoming everything God created you to be, is not in one big leap. It's in small, consistent steps. God didn't create the world in one day. He took 6 days, adding something new each time, building on what He had already done. The same principle applies to your life. You don't have to do it all at once. Just focus on improving 1% every day. When you wake up each morning with the mindset of progress, no matter how small, you set yourself up for success. Maybe today you decide to be 1% kinder, to give a little more grace, to say a few more encouraging words. Maybe tomorrow you're 1% more disciplined, spending a little less time on distractions and a little more time on your goals. The day after, you're 1% more prayerful, spending a few extra minutes talking to God, strengthening your faith. Over time, these small improvements add up. You don't notice it immediately, but little by little, God is shaping you into the person He created you to be. Think about David. When he was a shepherd boy, he didn't start out as a giant slayer. He didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to defeat Goliath. No, he started small, watching over sheep, fighting off lions and bears, improving little by little. Each challenge prepared him for the next. By the time he stood before Goliath, he had already built up the skills, the confidence, and the faith he needed to win. The same is true for you. God has great things in store for your future, but it starts with what you do today. It starts with showing up, giving your best, and improving just a little bit, day by day. When we want to make a change in our lives, we feel like we have to do something huge right away. We think, I need to get in shape, so I'll start working out for 2 hours a day. Or I need to improve my finances, so I'll cut out all my expenses at once. But the problem with this approach is that big, drastic changes are hard to maintain. We get excited at first, but when we don't see immediate results, we get discouraged and give up. That's why real lasting change doesn't come from one huge leap. It comes from small, consistent steps. If you focus on just getting 1% better every day, over time, those little improvements add up to something amazing. Think about how God created the world. He didn't do it all in one instant. The Bible says He took 6 days, adding something new each day: light, land, animals, and finally people. God could have spoken everything into existence all at once, but He chose to build it step by step. If the Creator of the universe works in steps, that tells us something. Progress happens little by little. This principle is true in every area of life. If you read 1 chapter of the Bible every day, in a year you'll have read through most of it. If you save a small amount of money each month, over time you'll build wealth. If you decide to be 1% more positive each day, eventually you'll transform your mindset. Think about a farmer planting seeds. He doesn't expect a full harvest overnight. He knows that first the seed has to be planted, then watered, then given time to grow. He doesn't dig it up every day wondering why it hasn't sprouted yet. He trusts the process. The same is true in our life. Just because you don't see big results right away doesn't mean your small efforts aren't working. David in the Bible is a great example of this. He didn't go from being a shepherd boy to defeating Goliath overnight. He built his skills in the small moments, fighting off lions and bears, learning to be faithful in the fields, staying patient in the process. Every little step prepared him for his big moment. If he had waited for something huge to happen before taking action, he never would have been ready when the opportunity came. That's why the Bible says in Zechariah 4:10, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." God isn't asking you to have it all figured out today. He just wants you to take one step in the right direction. Don't get overwhelmed trying to change everything at once. Instead, focus on making small improvements every day. Over time, those little steps will turn into big breakthroughs. Stay consistent, trust the process, and keep moving forward. Your transformation is happening one step at a time. Many people never reach their full potential because they are waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, or the perfect conditions to begin. They think, I'll start working out when I have more time, or I'll go after my dreams when everything falls into place. But the truth is, perfection is not the key to success. Consistency is. God never asks us to be perfect. He never said, do everything exactly right or I won't bless you. No, He blesses faithfulness. He blesses those who show up even when they don't feel like it. The Bible says in Galatians 6:9, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." Notice it doesn't say you'll reap a harvest if you do everything perfectly. It says if you don't give up. We think we have to be the best at something before we even begin. But God isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for consistency. When you show up every day, when you keep doing the right thing even when no one is watching, when you stay faithful in the little things, that's when growth happens. Look at how God works in nature. A tree doesn't grow tall overnight. A seed doesn't become a harvest in an instant. It takes time, daily watering, daily sunlight, steady, consistent progress. If a farmer planted a seed and then dug it up every day to check if it was growing, the plant would never have a chance to take root. The same is true for us. If we keep stopping and starting, waiting for everything to be perfect, we'll never see the results God has in store for us. Think about David before he became king. He didn't wait for a big moment to start being faithful. He didn't say, I'll take my calling seriously when I'm on the throne. No, he was consistent in the small things, watching the sheep, protecting them, practicing his skills. Long before he ever faced Goliath, he was preparing in private. His consistency in the little things made him ready when the big moment came. The enemy will try to discourage you by making you think you're not doing enough. He'll tell you, what's the point? You're not seeing any results. But that's a lie. Every little bit of effort adds up. When you pray daily, even if it's just for a few minutes, your faith grows. When you choose to speak positive words instead of negative ones, little by little, your mindset shifts. When you show up for your dreams, even when progress feels slow, doors begin to open. David's story is one of faithfulness, patience, and preparation. When we think of David, we often remember him as the mighty king of Israel or the young man who defeated Goliath. But what we sometimes overlook is how he got there. David didn't step into greatness overnight. He wasn't born a warrior or a leader. He became one through small, consistent steps of faith and obedience. Long before David ever fought Goliath, he was just a shepherd boy tending his father's sheep. It wasn't a glamorous job. He wasn't in the spotlight. He didn't have an audience cheering him on. He was out in the fields day after day doing what seemed like an insignificant task, but God was watching. While others saw just a boy watching sheep, God saw a future king in the making. During those years in the pasture, David was developing the skills he would later need. He learned how to protect the sheep from lions and bears, how to use a slingshot with precision, and how to be a leader even when no one was watching. His consistency in the little things. Then one day an opportunity came. The Israelites were at war with the Philistines, and a giant named Goliath was taunting them. Every soldier in Israel was too afraid to fight him. But David, the same shepherd boy who had been faithful in the pasture, stepped forward and said, "I'll fight him." People laughed. They said, "You're just a boy. You're not trained for battle." But what they didn't understand was that David had already been preparing in private. When he told King Saul he could defeat Goliath, he said in 1:17:37, "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Notice what David did. He looked back at his past victories. He didn't focus on the size of the giant. He focused on what God had already done for him. He knew that if God had been faithful before, He would be faithful again. When David stepped onto the battlefield, he didn't have a sword or a shield. He didn't try to fight like everyone else. He used what he had, a slingshot and 5 smooth stones. With one shot, he brought the giant down. David's story teaches us that God prepares us in the quiet seasons, the times when we feel overlooked, the times when we're doing the small things that no one notices. That's where our character is developed. If David had waited for the throne before acting like a king, he never would have been ready. But because he was faithful in the pasture, God promoted him to the palace. You feel like you're in a waiting season, like you're doing small, unnoticed tasks while others are stepping into big opportunities. But let me encourage you, God sees you. He is preparing you. Stay faithful where you are, because when the time is right, He will elevate you to where you're meant to be. Sometimes in life, we feel like our efforts are too small to make a difference. We have big dreams, big goals, and big prayers, but when we look at where we are right now, it feels insignificant. Maybe you're just starting a new job, building a business, working on a relationship, or trying to grow spiritually, but the progress seems slow. You wonder, am I even making a difference? Is this small effort really worth it? But God has a different perspective. He rejoices in small beginnings. In Zechariah 4:10, the Bible says, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." Notice, God doesn't wait until you've reached the finish line to celebrate you. He isn't just pleased when you finally achieve your goal. He is rejoicing in the very fact that you started. Think about how God works in nature. When you plant a seed, you don't see instant results. You don't put a seed in the ground and wake up the next day to a full-grown tree. No, growth takes time. First, the seed has to take root underground where no one can see it. Then, little by little, it begins to sprout, growing inch by inch. But just because you don't see a harvest right away doesn't mean nothing is happening. In the same way, when you take even a small step in faith, God sees it, He blesses it, and He is working behind the scenes. Look at Moses. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he didn't feel ready. He said, "God, I'm not a good speaker. I don't have what it takes." But God wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for obedience. Moses took small steps, trusting God, and over time, he became the leader God called him to be. Or think about Jesus. He didn't start his ministry by preaching to massive crowds. He began by gathering a few disciples, teaching them, mentoring them. It was a small beginning, but that small group of men went on to change the world. You feel like what you're doing isn't big enough. You're trying to grow spiritually, but you're only able to spend a few minutes in prayer each day. You're working on a business, but it feels like you're making slow progress. You're trying to improve your health, but you're only seeing small changes. Let me encourage you. God sees your effort and He is rejoicing over you right now. Don't wait until you've arrived to start celebrating. Don't dismiss your progress just because it's small. Everything great starts small. God is not asking you to have it all figured out. He's just asking you to take the next step. If you stay faithful, if you keep showing up, if you don't despise the small beginnings, you'll see God take you places you never imagined. Keep going, because your best days are still ahead. No matter what you're facing today, no matter what disappointments, setbacks, or struggles you've been through, I want to remind you of this truth. Your best days are still ahead. It's easy to look at the past and think, I've already seen my best days. I've missed my opportunity. I've made too many mistakes. But that is not what God says. He promises in Jeremiah 29:11, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." That means God has something greater in store for you. And just because you haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Sometimes life doesn't go the way we planned. Maybe you thought you'd be further along by now. Maybe you expected to have that promotion, that relationship, that dream fulfilled, but it hasn't happened yet. The enemy will try to convince you that it's too late, that you've reached your limit, that things will never change. But let me encourage you, God is not finished with you. What He started in your life, He will bring to completion. Look at Job in the Bible. He went through some of the worst hardships anyone could face. He lost his family, his health, and his wealth. It seemed like his best days were behind him. But the Bible says in Job 42:12, the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. In other words, what was ahead of him was greater than what was behind him. He went on to have more than he had lost, and God restored him in ways he never expected. The same can be true for you. Just because you've been through struggles doesn't mean your story is over. Just because you face disappointments doesn't mean God doesn't still have something amazing in your future. What looks like the end is often just the beginning. God is setting you up for something greater. David went through years of hardship before he became king. Joseph was betrayed and put in prison before he became a ruler in Egypt. Sarah waited decades before she had the child God promised. But in every case, the waiting wasn't wasted. God was preparing them for something better. You may not see how everything is going to work out, but that's okay. God doesn't ask us to understand the plan. He asks us to trust Him. He sees what we can't see. He's working behind the scenes. He's lining up the right people, the right opportunities, the right breakthroughs. Don't give up and don't settle where you are. God has more for you. He has new blessings, new relationships, new opportunities, and new victories in your future. Keep believing, keep expecting, and keep moving forward, because your best days are still ahead. As we come to the end of this message, I want to remind you, God has more in store for you. No matter what you've been through, no matter what disappointments or delays you've faced, your story is not over. The best days of your life are not behind you. They are still ahead. You may not see it yet, but God is working behind the scenes. He is setting things in motion that you can't even imagine. The dreams He placed in your heart, the promises He made to you, they are still alive. What He started, He will finish. So don't settle where you are. Don't let fear, doubt, or past failures convince you that you've reached your limit. God is a God of new beginnings. He is always moving you forward, always preparing something greater. If you stay in faith, if you keep trusting Him, you will step into the breakthroughs, the blessings, and the victories He has waiting for you.